Okay. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I'm a little bound to my podium today with my button pressing, but I'm Eliza Duenow, and originally from Highland Park, Chicago, and I've been moved around a lot in the last couple of decades. I currently run the ARC, it's a community-based arts organization, and I'm in Tel Aviv right now. So I was going to jump in and share some images and anecdotes directly from the field of working with children, but given the shockingly not shocking, awful, tragic situation with the school shootings and such, and the fact that my nephew and niece were barricading their high school door last week in a narrowly averted shooting, I want to share a personal anecdote which directly illustrates the power of this work. So last 4th of July, visiting my family in Highland Park, I had 2 children, 10 and 12, and we were on our way walking the 4th of July parade, and all of a sudden crowds started coming, running down the street. And they were like, turn around, there's someone with a gun, and it was, I get shivers thinking about it. It turns out there was some very disturbed young person top of our 5 corner store shooting down at the 4th of July parade, like rainbow decorated bikes and all, crazy. And so we obviously turned around with our lawn chairs, went back in. Luckily my family's always late for everything, so we narrowly averted that. And spent the rest of the day in this kind of disembodied state, like totally dissociated. And didn't know how to talk to the children about it. I mean, we're from Tel Aviv, so we've got Gaza rockets and terrorists, and they're used to it. That was actually more shocking to me than it wasn't shocking to them. That was a whole other issue. But us adults, we were completely disoriented and unable to communicate or process. Like, I think we went to like Trader Joe's or something. Like, it was just nuts. All in the process of them still having this guy at large in town. And we were like, should we lock down this? Anyways, by the evening, my children were eyeing the new hot tub my brother had installed. He was getting married in 3 days. This happened in the wake of just before that. And the children discovered this box of, it was 1,000 little glow sticks that he bought for the occasion. And we looked at each other, the kids were like, please, can we play in the hot tub? And he was like, yalla, let's do it. And he broke open this box of glow sticks, and we all got in the hot tub with some guilt and awkwardness about having this moment in the wake of this tragic morning, and broke open 1,000 glow sticks and just came back into ourselves. Picking up these like gobs of beautiful rainbow lights and breathing in like the bubbles and the hot air in our bodies, it brought us totally back into our physical selves. And it was mentally and emotionally, it was just this experience of delight, and just in this like spiritual sense, having this warm little cove of family sitting together, it was just magic. So I say this to illustrate to go into this conversation of what I do in this conscious married work. I think that this currency of healing is something that is like eons old, and it's something that we've lost track with. Vivek Murthy, our current U.S. Surgeon General, says that we are in a crisis of health, and he defines it not as a health like the old paradigm of health, which is, I think, I always write it down, the mental, physical, financial, and social health is the old paradigm. But he's redefined the paradigm of health and wellness as a crisis, this crisis that we're in, of wellness and meaning. And the new idea, the new paradigm of what wellness means to us is more of like awareness and connection and insight and purpose. And if that's not, I'm being hosted here by the Caucus of the Spiritual and the Arts, and if that's not spiritual, I mean, yes, I don't know what it is. So we've shaken up this whole paradigm. And it's so interesting that the scientific community, just so that it's not, I like that it's not so stigmatized anymore. And in my work, it's taken 2 decades to kind of have this be a more overt narrative, and how I'm working with children, how I'm talking to parents about it, how I'm training my teachers. I've kind of always come around the side, and now there's all this really cool science to back it up. There's like the science of the physiology of trauma studies, and how, when we see in our classrooms all the time, children are triggered in their amygdala into fight, flight, freeze, and breaking out in tantrums or having like a, that's my drawing, or she ripped my thing, or and how they lose track of actually lose access to the frontal lobes. Like, this is a newer science, 60, 70 years old. And neuroscience itself, this concept that we are all walking smoke detectors, and we're sensing our felt safety in the world, and if we don't have it, we're closed up, and we can't actually access art making as this flow state. This is a really young science that they're looking at. It's like 25 years old. So all of this, like the physiology, when I train my teachers, we talk about regulation, and I'll talk about it in the talk today, but we can't work with children and expect them to be regulated unless we regulate ourselves first. And this idea of co-regulation, the new science that they have, there's some amazing, I'm happy to share resources, they can actually put all those sensors and goobery wires and stuff on, and they can have a teacher next to a child, and they can actually measure that the child's heart rate will match our slower heart rate. They can measure that. It's amazing. They can measure that the adrenaline and the cortisol levels, mine is quite high right now, but that the child, if you can get yours regulated lower, it will match the child. The child will match our lower rate. And they can also measure that the brain activation states will match. So it's like from one-to-one, teacher to child, and also out in protests, like with masses of people. They've done studies, and it's actually this beautiful kind of unsciency thing that everyone's heart rates and adrenaline levels and brain activation spaces match. So there's this magic that the science can see now. And that's what I want to talk about in this work, because I'm interested in this conversation about conscious mirroring work and how we work with children at this level. So now to start with the real talk, that's to frame it. So creative consciousing. This is a term that I coined when my children were young and watching them come into themselves. And I just was fascinated as a young mother, like seeing how these beings were really just becoming how they come into the world already their own beings, and how they explore what it means to be who they are. What I do with children, Israel is from Tel Aviv, for those of you who are coming in late, it's an interesting school system that ends at 1:30. And so I work with kids at this nice long stretch. I'm a private program option from 1:30 until 5. So I have them for like 3.5, 4 hours, which is amazing. And I work with small groups of kids, ages 5 to 10, only like 10 to 12 kids at a time, and with like 2 or 3 teachers. So it's like really, really about connection-based work. I basically, I like to say, I do creative play with materials and ideas. I'm playing with children for a living. Very connection-based, very child-centered, immersion curriculum. I base it all on social emotional attunement. I have a Reggio-inspired background. I have partnerships with Reggio schools there. So I use a lot of the Reggio tools. I inserted trauma-informed mindfulness. I'm a yoga teacher. I have trauma certifications. And I'm a real trauma geek, like I have 6 years of studies. And what we are all outside from pre-corona era, we moved outside. And so we're working in nature and urban wanderings. I do have like these, I would say, garden house setups. I have 5 sites in Tel Aviv and about 8 different programs, a staff of almost a dozen teachers who I train, and they've been with me for a long time. They're working artists, teaching artists. And another way to say it, holding space to embrace chaos. This is my desk, the wall above my desk. That's my personal chaos there. And this is actually William Estrada's, you might know that, Shannon, from my days in Chicago. I'll talk about that. I was a director of education at Hyde Park Art Center. And there's a lot of my colleagues here. Shannon's working with me in Chicago. So just a brief background of my personal background. I've always played with the unconventional. My parents are hippie artists from the 60s. They're both art educators, so I'm second generation. And I've always been intrigued with this idea of the mystical and profane. My mother was hosting swamis and gurus from India before there was yoga on every street corners. I grew up in the 70s. And my father was actually, right as he retired 20 years ago, was Illinois Art Association Educator of the Year, I guess in that way. So we've always been playing with this idea of art as consciousness. I've always put myself into subcultures At university, my bachelor's under thesis, I studied comparative religion Eastern, was looking at the history of female asceticism in the East and India. And my grad school work at the University of Chicago was what I like to call with all the ologies. So I'm a social scientist, cultural anthro was my thing, and looking at how people understand themselves and construct identity, and visual culture was my specialty. However, the academy was way too ego-intellectualizing and competitive for me in this way that I couldn't access, and I wanted to kind of take all these cool ideas and ground them, which is what led me to the arts work. I have worked for about 25 years in the arts education arena, and I say that I play with the trinity of underdogs in education, art, consciously work, which we could call spirituality, and play. And all of these have, I think, undeserved recognition, or less recognition, and not as much funding, of course. When I was in Chicago, like, we were begging and scraping on the south side and west side to get money in any art schools. Obviously, you all know it's the first thing that's cut. So, to clarify, creative consciousing, what I'm talking about, this is a drawing by my son when he was probably 5 or 6. If I could only be a child. Consciousing is not something that I'm proposing that we do for children. We're not packaging it up and giving it to them. It's their own process. If any of you have gone into grad studies of phenomenology, which is this whole study of consciousness, that's way too big and deep and intense, and those texts are fascinatingly dense. But it's to clarify and simplify. It's about having no preconceived notions, which means children getting to a place of affirming who they are beyond their identity markers, what color their skin is, or they're tall, they're short. It's beyond their thoughts, I really believe this, and beyond their feelings even, I'm a happy kid, I'm a goofy kid, I'm a clowny kid. It's not all that. This is a beautiful connected dots portrait by a child I work with who's on the spectrum. He's amazing. And it's a fully embodied experience. That's super important, this whole idea of embodiment. It's there is nothing more present than being in the body. For those of you who, we're in a room of artists here and such, everyone, when I speak about this, and I speak at play-based conferences and also trauma work groups, so people who aren't artists, everyone has this place that they can go to and feel like they can tap in. I call it the safe magic heart and soul play place. It's your inner artist, your inner dancer. In the yoga world, they call it the open heart, open mind. If you know from the field of positive psychology, Csikszentmihalyi talks about this idea of flow. It's amazing work about reaching this optimal state. Some people can do it like sports, people do it through running. Obviously, meditators here, people who cook, people who dance. In Buddhism, they call it the receptive observer witness state, where we're actually seeing from another little viewpoint who we are and what we're doing. But currently, when we work with children and they enter the site, we have a contained space, say what I have, the garden house, I do this thing with them I call practicing presence. And it's about welcoming them into the space. They're coming from a class with 30 kids, with one teacher, and the chaos and rigidity of that, and conventional teaching and frontal teaching, into this very open space of welcoming. I kind of see myself as this funky second mother almost to them. And we do something that is centering and grounding and landing in the space. And a series of exercises that it's almost a field work that I'm doing these last years of understanding it's different activities, different days, different children, this breathing or some of the tapping exercises and singing, stretching. If any of you are familiar with stimulating the vagus nerve, I think it's even gone on TikTok now, how to stimulate your vagus nerve. People are talking about this, or maybe it's just my own very curated experience. And being regulated, just to clarify, it's not about being calm. We're not just trying to get our kids to this calm, quiet state. It's actually getting to a state that fits the needs of the moment, the situation. And sometimes if we're going to go into a movement dancing thing, or a really full body active art making, need the fitting energy is going to be more activated than and sometimes if we're still doing a project around the table, I do less and less around the table over the years, you do want them to be a little more quiet so that they stay around the table. So I'm researching this with the children. I think that it would be nice if you can entertain me and lead you through one of the iterations of the practicing presence to do a little momentary mindfulness meditation. So you don't have to think we're doing anything funky or special. You can leave your eyes open or you can close them. And I'll just a couple minutes. You can sit, maybe like put down your nose, shake your hands up, land in your body a little bit. And I'll guide you through it so you hear my voice. And how we start is just to come back to our senses. And you can tune into the sounds. Some nice music next door. And you don't have to chase the sounds or push them away. Having a party next door. And just breathe, and that will really land in your body. And what you'll find is that the mind is going to do what the mind does. We have monkey minds. And if you cannot hop on the train of the mind, which the mind do things, it remembers, it worries, dreams, imagines, plans, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go remember to tell my mother to get this for my kid, or call my husband, or I have to pick up that pen I wanted. So just let all that kind of flow by and not jump on that train. The best way is in its anchor besides sounds. It's the breath always, because that's where we are, what we are. Slowly come out of it. When we work with this mind, the breath is anchor, and the mind is this whirling monkey, trains with my thoughts. I like to work with the mind, see the mind as a playground, just like how I work with children. And my favorite teaching artist and how I work with children, these are my own two on a Reggio playground that I do programs at, is that thoughts are, if you imagine your thoughts and feelings like children, and to not to just oversee them, not control. You're not intruding on their play, you're not judging, you're not ignoring, and you're just being curious with how they are. And that's, I think, the best way to work with children and also our minds and the chaos that our minds and children are. So Tara Brock and Jeff Cornfield are some of the leaders in this mindfulness work, living leaders, and they have this acronym that they use in the work called RAIN, which stands for to recognize, this is in regards to thoughts, recognize your thoughts, allow them, then investigate what they're about, and then nurture them, be like, oh, okay, I feel you have that. And Laura Nost is beautiful, if you're not familiar with her work. She's an author. She writes about gentle parenting, but for all caregivers. And her acronym is LOVE in regards to children. To listen, to observe, to validate, and to empathize. And it's the same. So I want to show this idea of how we work with our minds, and how we work with children, and what I'm proposing in this creative consciousness. So, and underneath it, just to underscore that, it really is all about love. And when I'm interviewing teachers and bringing them into our programs, one of the first questions is, I'm like, do you like children? Like, do you love children? Because I don't want to have you on staff unless you really love children, they excite you. You're like, wow, these little creatures, these beings are amazing. So I love kids. I think they're brilliant. So the journey in this work, from seeing to awareness to allowing, I'm going to go a little faster so I don't lose my time, and the understanding of what we see and feel, just reviewing this process. Neuroception, that we're these walking detectors, these nervous systems, and to feel safe, and we always do this in the beginning, to this practicing presence, to be at peace in the presence, and to play with the kids. You have to feel safe in order to really go into play and to creatively flow. So, just to say, I've referenced this before, but there's many layers behind this work that informs the work of my background and my personal journeys and certifications and healings, and it's something that always was a separate thing. There was my work, and then there was my personal growth and my spiritual work. And now I've gotten to a place after 20 years where it's all just overtly there. I talk to parents about it. I say, wow, I'm doing this really new work with audio, SSP, safe and sound protocol with Stephen Porges, who's a neuroscientist, and I'm doing it with my son, doing it with me, and I'm going to integrate it with the children. And I've gotten to a place of confidence where I don't feel like there's a stigma that there used to be. And I think the whole world, there's less of a stigma about doing all this alternative healing work. That's the world I created for myself. So the first iteration of this work, I was the Director of Education at Hyde Park Art Center on the south side of Chicago, and I was coming out of a very high-food intellectual environment at the University of Chicago of identity studies and visual culture and this cultural anthro. And so I came into this work in a community art center, which is an amazing community art center, like the oldest in like the country, right? And playing with the idea of the power of art. I was really big about ideas. It took me a long time to go more into materials. My wonderful teaching artists, like, were material based. I wasn't actually out in the field with the kids. I was directing and envisioning and designing curriculum and training teachers. And for me, the work was about giving kids access in schools that had, there's 600 Chicago public schools, there's not a lot of art. Access to play with materials, access to teaching artists to think differently. There's some amazing anecdotes from Chicago years. I could do a whole story about teachers pulling me aside before we bring our artists in and saying, like, my kids are like the children of crack addicts and this, this projects, and you can only use like quiet colored crayons in our classroom. And I'd be like, what exactly is a quiet colored crayon? You tell me what colors those are. People who were afraid if we did anything abstract, what is that? What could their children be making? That could be dangerous. Like, you could really see the power of art from that angle of like fear. So freedom of artistic expression. This is a beautiful piece from I think she was a 12-year-old on the south side, and I was very interested in giving children voice and understanding their identity construction expression through. So after almost a decade in Chicago, what I left with, what was most important, was this. I love this. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's like blurry over the years, recounting it here. So at the heart and core that I left with is this idea of the flow of mark making, this delight of discovery, this fulfillment of expression, and this pride of public voice. We did a lot of community-based work, and the children, murals and mosaics, and creating things outside, whether even if it was like painted chalk on the ground. This joy of creative community, and they're out there in the public. It's not just a piece of paper on a table. So, as my kids would say in their TikTok world, let's get to the good stuff. The ARC is the current iteration that I'm working with in Tel Aviv, almost 10 years. It's a multi-potentiating acronym that I pull up from the influence from my grad school days at arts, rousing, revision, revitalizing community and consciousness that I'm playing with. As I said, this evolved out of my past work, creative play in a new way with a different freedom program. So I don't actually have to clarify to the parents that discover me. I'm a very word of mouth, grassroots person. I don't do a lot of marketing. I'm not very good at social media. If you look into my pieces, but it's all word of mouth, and people know that I'm not a classic art teacher. I'm not interested in teaching art. It's really about experiencing a different level of creativity and materials and ideas and going into that together. I've been working with kids to be mindfully attuned. I love doing work that is socially relevant, talking with kids about big questions, and having their work be community engaged. We do a lot of public pieces, and I also always have a sense of irreverence with the work with the kids, which they love. So when they start doing things, poop this, poop that, I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. So the early years we were working a lot with understanding coming into our bodies through the felt sensory experiences. This is a great grounding mindfulness activity where another one of my practicing presence, you see 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you smell, touch, taste, and it really kind of brings you back into the moment. So we work a lot with the 5 senses, and then if you're not familiar, there's the 6th, 7th, and 8th sense. They're on order in the slide for a reason. But proprioception is understanding our body in space, vestibular awareness, our body in movement, a lot of yoga, this understanding of how do we know when we put our arm up and it's going to catch the ball coming towards us. That is a sense. It's a sense of knowing. Some people have it, some people don't. When kids are off, as occupational therapists will tell you, when kids are off lower proprioception, they won't be able to sit still in their chairs. You can see which children in your classroom have this sense developed and not. So we we look at all of this through art and play and the ways of being and explore it with the kids. We talk about it with them. So early years, just like run through the sensories really quick. Here's Wittgenstein's Duck Rabbit, optical illusions playing with kids. Here's some homemade perfumes, a beautiful collection of essential oils. We bring them out. Here's turning ourselves into a one-man band. This is a still from a video. I'm not sure if that's on my website, where they make all sorts of instruments from like the clanky things to like washboard, and then they like play junk. They play all together, and it's like beautiful music. Where's my cursor? Art and bread is always amazing. Access like to ovens always in the house, and they create it, decorate, eat it. This looks like chocolate in the middle, but it's actually paint. So we did a whole series of like get stuffed animals from the thrift shop and stuffed animal printmaking, where they like put the stuffed animal in and then painted. Veggie dyes, like cooking with like these beautiful big vats that I have access to some schools where we have access to this amazing kitchen. And I mean, this is not stuff that like makes it like bright, beautiful t-shirts like your t-shirt, but it's the process for the product, and that's very exciting. And they're always like, mine is so pastel-y, a doll salon. I collected a series of dolls. I bring back like 3 suitcases of stuff from thrift shops in America every year for the programs. So they each got a doll. This one somehow magically really came out looking like this child. I love that. Paper making is always a beautiful sensory experience to do with children, like full body art making. This is one of my favorites. We did a whole camp on, I do camps also over the holidays, on the sense of home, concept of home. So in this one, we actually flipped the whole classroom over, upside down chairs, upside down tables. We gave them hundreds of meters, yards, as they say here, of string and rope and yarn, and they wove these webs that actually could hold the kids' weight. It was really amazing. And I got a grant from the city last year to produce this outside in a public park, and it was incredible. I'll have to put some pictures up on the website, but it was this. The kids did it all. Like, I don't instruct them on how to, hammock a tie or this. We study knots a little, and we talk about webs, and we look at mandala forms, and then I just let them loose. And the one in the park, I don't have an image of it. It was like, as big as half this room, and they were like, they looked like bugs caught in it, wandering, and it was spectacular. So yoga. This is what I say with this idea of proprioception, this awareness. This one we did a series of letters with that. Here's us exploring Chinese medicine and reflexology. We literally like get them up on the table, they lay each other down, and they put hands on each other, and they understand. Like, you study these charts of where the pressure points are. This point accesses the heart, and this, and they're fascinated with these maps from Chinese healing and such. Here there's an exploration of tango dancing and the mapping, and there's a video on my website of that, kids dancing, and I dance with them. Super fun. Underscoring all this work, we're always looking at the vocabulary, the sense experiences, what they're sensing, and the vocabulary feelings. So I also have background training in NVC, which is nonviolent communication, and they pass out always in this training these amazing pages and pages of like a million different ways to express your feelings. So here's a beautiful chart. You can find these on Pinterest online. But there's basically 6 different feelings, and everything that you could feel supposedly radiates out from these basic: fear, surprise, anger, disgust, sadness, happiness. Some of them have love in there, like they turn, I forget which one, into. And we talk with the kids, like amazing conversations about how there's like 6 different ways to say you're angry, and they're upset, and they're rageful, and they're furious, and they're mad, and like what do they all mean? And having these conversations is wonderful. We put out tables of emojis, little cutout emojis, and even though some of the kids can't read yet, we talk about how to identify, like how to feel into that emoji, and we put the 6 emotions and let them put this, that, and they argue about, well, this face looks more like this, and this face looks more like this, and it just leads to some amazing openings for the children, getting to know them. In the yoga world, they say, name it to tame it. So when you're in your meditation and you're like, oh, you feel this feeling come up, and if you look at it, if you're like, wow, I'm angry, just say it. If you name it, then actually it'll pass you quickly. It's a secret. And that's a system of emotional regulation. So this year, I'm doing a whole year, the most overt exploration of all this with my kids. The program is called, and I'm calling it the Year of Embodiment Explorations, which has been amazing. All these schemas of looking at bodies, like our physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, energetic bodies, and actually talking about all this with children. This is, so every week the kids come once or twice a week, some kids come 3 times a week to me. This is an experiment where we looked at these 5 ancient cleansers, let's see if I can remember them: salt, vinegar, baking soda, olive oil, and I'm forgetting the 5th one. Anyways, we gave them a whole series of things that dirty them, like cherry juice and dirt and markers, and we let them like dirty their arms and then test the ancient cleansers on like which would rub it off their arms, and then like track it with a survey chart of the which one was the best, and leaving stains. And for kids who have like real sensory issues, and they're like, I don't want that stuff on me, we let them do it on a paper towel or on plate. I think we let them do it. Here's handmade stories where we were looking at all the stories that we started out. How did they know how to speak without words? And they this is great, this is peaceful. Like they're even like, I know this, Sorry. And then understanding the stories. There's all these this is very edgy stuff. The stories, and there's 3 different patterns. Like I think it's a loop, a swirl, and what the other one is of thumbprints. And then they tell you like what kind of person you are, like just readings. And this is not science, but they love playing with that, and then discovering like I have 3 girls who are like 3 musketeers who are best friends, and they all had the same thumb pattern, which was like amazing. Their parents were like, that's amazing. Like, very fun little story experiences together. So after all those little projects, it's not really about what we do with the children though, it's about how to be with them. Over the years, we have, like I said, we've moved more and more outside. We've had more and more play outdoors. I turned to do, instead of creative exploration programs, a lot more creative discovery programs, these field trips. I started doing these camps, and now I have field trip programs 3 days a week where we're riding public buses with the kids to random areas of town. And besides showing them, yes, we do the art museum and botanical gardens and nature studies, but I'm also taking them to the south side of Tel Aviv, and we're going like ethnic supermarkets where we can stand for 20 minutes in front of a pig head, and the kids are like, do they eat the ears? And like amazing stuff. And it is, I'm working with the English speakers in Tel Aviv, so it is a bit of a more privileged community, but we have connections on the south side of the city there's a huge refugee populations from Sudan and Eritrea and Ethiopian Jews that have come in, and just to expose the kids in these cultural explorations together to make their world larger, that it's not just, their small world, the parks and malls on the other side of the city. We're doing this year a really cool survey of all the parks in Tel Aviv, and the kids came up with the categories of how to rate the park. It's like, does it smell like cat pee? Is there dog food? Does it have a good drinking fountain? Is it too babyish? And these were the kids. We do this in discussion. Even if they can't write, I'm taking down their words, and then I print out the surveys, and then we go to the parks, and they're really into being like, this park is, they get 10 rating of 10, or rating of 1. I'm going to put that one at the end of the year. We're going to make a big program project of it, put it online. We've done restaurant reviews where we'll sit and do mindful eating of French fries, so I give them 1 French fry at a time, and I make them really like in the same like chart-like way experience. They call out, mine's oily or salty, and really going into the senses. Mine is chubby or greasy, and all these words, just practicing like this sensing of it. And give me another fry, I need to taste it again. So, shop interviews. Anyway, interviewed an amazing toy shop owner, of course, the toy shop owner, and then also the social entrepreneurialism of art, of beyond the lemonade stand. We've sat on the corner and made like non-bake balls with chocolate, peanut butter, and oatmeal, and then sold them. And that was a big failure because it was melting all over. People were like, I don't want to put that in my mouth. But the lemonade was really popular. We picked it from real like trees, and also gathering their toys and selling them. We do work connected to charity and like support these communities that we met on the south side. So every year we do these art activities books where the kids draw them, like the Connect the Dots drawing was from that. And we put together these beautiful big books, and we make like 100 copies, and we gift them for Christmas to these communities there. I pick up kids on foot from like 6 or 7 schools a day, and we walk with them back to drop our bags somewhere in corners, and I do I always tell the parents they should feel grateful that I teach kids to like garbage pick and dumpster dive. It's in my nature. I love like going in and finding and reusing. I believe that scavenging is an art. These are some of like the really wild things that people just leave on the street for garbage collection. And then we put them in corners of parks and we play with them. Will they be there next week? And what can we do with them? Should we build something? They love it. So we've kind of made our own junkyard playground. We do a lot of, some parents come to me before they realize what I do, and they're like, do you teach them English? Like, no, I'm not an English teacher, I'm an art teacher, but I do some text integrated work. I'm also a writer, and we work in English. It's an immersive environment, so their English will improve working in our programs. This is one of my favorite ones, Yom Kippur, if you're familiar with it. Here, it works differently in the States. In Israel, this is one day of the year where like the highways shut down, no one drives. It's amazing. You can like go biking and skating on the highways. The kids love this holiday. And we leave out hundreds of bundles of chalk, inviting the public, since we're walking all over the roads, to play with us on the streets. And we're out there. I have like groups of kids and teachers making art. Urban interventions are a huge thing. We have like street teams of kids and playing with the environment and having these leaving invitations to the public to play with our ideas as they're walking through the community. More text integrated work. What I'm known for most, that I got famous for in Tel Aviv, interestingly, is that I brought Halloween to Tel Aviv. And like 6 years ago, I started with our nursery school group for my kids, and I was like, you gotta have Halloween. And it's grown now, and I have an interactive map, and we have like 250 houses on the map every Halloween. And like 300 people showed up at my little corner park by my house with like waiting for the map, and then they go trick-or-treating of like to those houses. And it's amazing community, and I have artists come to the park and they make we're making like Halloween arts. So this is a spoken word poetry that I do with the kids. We talk about, we learn about Dia de los Muertos, and this is I forget, these poetries are like death, in the tradition of death poetry from Mexico. There once was a monster. He called me, but then he said goodbye because he died. So that's a poem. So they're like that. This is a poetry. Is another like a project I do iterations of every year. Poetry where the kids write these poems and then we hang them from trees like ornaments and we leave them there in the park for people to find. I always kind of have to explain to some of the parents this, and I really feel like it's littering. I'm contributing these poems to the park. So these are two of my favorite projects. Engaging community. Mindfulness chalk walks are something I do every year with all the groups multiple times, and we take a strip of a block and we invite the kids to, we arm them with chalk, and we invite the kids to mark up that strip of road with an invitation or a way to alter someone's experience. So basically like stop and smell the roses, or count how many white cars on this block. There's a lot of white cars in Tel Aviv. Just to say, look at the trees, don't forget the clouds, and they kind of get really in. Those who don't write, they use arrows and circling and such. This is a Facebook group I have. It's called TLV Rocks, double meaning, and we do a rock project where they leave messages of hope and joy and love. Like what we talk about, this idea of affecting people's experience of their day. What can they do? Is it through words? Is it through symbols? Like, if someone was walking down the street and they found a rock with an image on it, what kind of image would make them feel what kind of way? And to show kids that they have this power through their art making to change someone's experience of their life, basically. So in the back of every rock that the kids make, we write, if found, post on Facebook, TLV Rocks, and re-hide. And people find their rocks and take pictures of it with them, and then the kids, I'm introducing them to how social media works, the kids get a check on the site and be like, wow, someone found my rock. I work a lot in nature. There's amazing, I'm very lucky, there's amazing nature corners where I live. There's probably like a few minute video on the website about this where we were doing more traditional botanical painting. I told a kid to go wash his brush in a puddle because it was there because a sprinkler overloaded, and the kids discovered that they could paint the puddle. And the whole day became like this 45, get the chills still, this is one of my favorite experiences, 45 minutes of them being like, wow, like they just went so deep, and these like, it was so beautiful, all the colors around, and then they discovered when they gave them all palettes, they're walking around with thumbs in these palettes, painting, they could discover they could put the whole palette down there in the water, and just like screaming out about, no, you ruined my blue, and the yellow won't go over the orange, and just really experiencing this art making in nature and how it affects them out of their control, what's in their control, and having these discussions. Eco arts is what we're known for a lot. It's play on the ground. This beautiful pond outside, just outside of Tel Aviv. We create fairy forests, or rather, we have kids see all the forests as fairy forests, and so they'll make little domiciles for the fairies imagined. Here's one that I could propose a whole 45-minute talk. This tree that was on the edge of a park that we work in across the city, where it had been there for 2 years of this program, and somehow the kids finally got big enough where they realized they could climb it. It's a big banyan tree where they grow up and then they shoot down these branches that re-root into the ground. And so towards the end of last year, the kids were like, I feel like we're big enough to get themselves up. And after one session, like, can we go back into the tree again? I'm like, okay, we went back to the tree. And after 3 sessions and 4 sessions, I was like, we're not going to go to the tree again, guys, because I feel like parents are going to be like, what are you doing with that one? You at that tree again? But the kids refused. They only wanted to be at this tree. So I had to deal with that. This emergent curriculum is emerging, just wants to be this tree. So I fought it for a while, and then I realized I have to follow my own wisdom, and I embraced the tree. And I made a budget, and we took them to a dollar store, we took them to a hardware store, and I let them buy things for their tree. And so they bought wood and hammer and nails, and I brought them a camera, we designed, here's pictures on here of them designing how they could do a ladder for their tree and how to go up it. They made a pulley system, they had all these huge plans. We were with this tree for 3 months. It was very, very deep. And I really had a lot of patience and kind of awkwardness explaining to the parents, and it was actually really beautiful. Because the kids were so overjoyed about this time, the parents actually were also like, thank you so much for having the patience to just let them be with this tree. And I was like, I'm so glad that you see how special it is. They're really just delighted. This is one of my favorite moments in that same park, where we were doing I don't even remember the chalk activity, and this is Davey, who's one of my favorites. He's been with me for 4 years. He wants to be a teacher someday, so he wants to join my program. And he was laying on the ground, slowly moving this chalk, and I was Davey, really slowly, honey, what are you doing? What's going on over there? I'm curious. And he said, I'm tracking where the pigeon goes. And he had his line of sight across the plaza. And this pigeon was slowly hopping across the plaza, and he was moving the chalk to the pigeon's movement. Wow, break my heart, amazing, gorgeous. So that one doesn't thrill the parents as much. I'm like, oh, your son is so She's like, okay, Eliza. So, favorite ways to get there if it's not evident. Slow down, not the speed that I'm talking this talk. Stay aware. Connect. This list is for us. To connect with the children. To feel safe. The children feel safe. To do something that I call wonder. To play. Play is the language of children. You can't explain all these materials and concepts. It's their language is play. To feel, that name and tame again. And to listen. Children express. They also should be encouraged to listen. So, arts and play and consciousness, these are the language of the soul. They're somatic processes. They need to be embodied. We have to feel our way back into ourselves. This is my son hugging the icon on the walkway, indicating whether it's for walking or biking. Spiritual journeys must be grounded in the body, since that is where we are present. That underscores everything in this work. If it's not obvious the why of this work with creative consciousing, these moments of delight. This is a beautiful illustrated dictionary project. We found these Hebrew English dictionaries on the street, and I let the kids irreverently rip pages out and illustrate them with the Buddhist prayer flags with all these illustrations. It was a gorgeous piece. So delight, opening their minds, showing them ways of seeing. Back to John Berger's was that 1970s beautiful PC piece on the book, Ways of Seeing. And for those people who want more like hard skills for life, social emotional intelligence, all the SEL work, I think that this comes from doing this work, executive functioning skills. They'll be operating better in the world with this ability of seeing in this way, and being regulated beings, despite all the triggers that we're all facing in the world. And of course, healed beings make better humans beyond all the buttons and bottles that we're going to be offered ahead, towards love and joy and peace. This work of consciousing is, firstly, if it's not clear, mostly for us. As teachers or parents, we serve many roles for children, whether we're their mirrors, whether we're their anchors, guides, or just friends. Children go into this work and these states more easily. And from a more personal angle here, in having the courage to embrace this immersion curriculum, you have to trust that the way will come. We have to trust. And I go out into the day, what are we going to find on the street? What are we going to do today? My father always said, all will be revealed. My mother has always said, like leaves in the wind, or maybe it was a river. My brother said, you can't build a garden, you can only lay the ground. The ground. So this idea of serendipity, synchronicity, and faith in what we're going into with the kids, this is this new kind of like this highly lauded risky play in the play-based world. Everyone's like risky play, that's where it's about. And this is the risk of it for us. This slide is for me. There are messages of meaning and magic everywhere. This is a graffiti artist I've been following for 18 years in Tel Aviv. He was like 15 years old when I moved there. He was a kid, American. His parents brought him over. And his tagline is no hope. He's brilliant. Now he's showing in galleries. I just watch him like rise. It's amazing. And I'll end with this. William Butler Yeats. The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. Questions. I have a whole creative ideation activity that I can, maybe I'll send you guys home with. We have like 5 minutes, and that talk's not until 9, so I'm happy to answer questions. If you guys want to do a brief ideation activity. Yeah? You game? Okay. So, we'll give you, I have something, it's not lovely. This is a fun bag together. Look at your object, and this is about how do we make meaning of what we run into in life. Think about what is your first response. What is the first word that comes to mind when you look at this object? The first feeling that comes to mind when you hold it. Like really tap in, be with this piece. Rub it, smell it, scratch it, listen to it, maybe try to break it. Tune in to whether you would taste it if you knew it was safe, like to smell it. Listen to it really close to your ear, like kind of crackle it. And name the first emotion that comes to mind, and maybe it's about this activity. Maybe you're like, this is silly, this is ridiculous, I'm annoyed, or maybe you're like, this is so fun. This says like, this is so much meaning, my grandmother brewed this in her house, or I found this like yesterday. An important question is, where do you want to put it on your person if you had to put it on yourself? Where might have been, think about where was it last? Who had it besides me? Where did I get it? What was that moment and place? What's the history? What's the story of this object? What could you make from it? Could you name it? Why did you pick it? Why did you pick it? And why did it pick you? And then how does that make you feel? And what does that mean? Anyone want to share? I know it's very personal. I know it's personal. Okay.
So I got a family size packet of Dr. Fisher idea for me. And a little bit of dirt on it. So I got to feel like whoever was at this in their little package of these dropped it. So, but it's, it has word vision on it. So I'm wondering if it's going to tell me something about my vision, not my eyesight, but just my vision for how I want. Cool. It's interesting. That's what everybody else is not. And I'm like, where is this? Well, I think that's right. Yeah. You say that word.
Instruction paper and a railroad board, and I just saw it like first, and I thought, that's my favorite color. I love rust, and so it just made me very happy. And then I turned it over, and there's a sticker on it that says plan. And this morning, my intention, the thing that I wanted to think about and discover, was really the next stage of my career.
Wow.
So I felt like this was very appropriate.
That's fantastic. They gave me shivers.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I got this really cool bag. I know this sounds silly, but it's not. It felt really good to me. At first I was like, why do I have a recyclable bag? But that has a knot already, so I can't put anything in it. And then I'm like, okay, what do you mean where I wear it? But, then I was like, well, I started playing with it, and then the sound made my head think of like trees rustling in the wind. And then I was like, oh, it kind of looks like an angel. So then I took a little glass and moved it around its head. I was like, oh no, it's a little girl. And so I'm this sweet little girl playing in the wind, my throat. So it was really fun to explore. Not just the subject itself, but definitely the inner because super into my spirit religion, and so, but to transform from that to the inner side, which is the child side, it's really cool. Thank you.
And I went to a range of emotions.
Sorry.
Disappointed. I'm like, all these natural materials. People are and so I really believe in the dialogue materials about natural people. And it's what I preach in my practice. I wish I was hired. And so this is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm like very much in my head. And so
Yeah.
like, me, why is there special sauce? I'm like separated from the material, I'm in a container here. And so I have to like challenge myself to be able to my body and I just started to play with it in my hands. And I was like, okay, there's a whole like kind of stressful effect of this habit in this material, which I can't really touch, but I can still have this relationship with it.
Love that. Stressful.
Yes.
So cool.
I don't want to eat it. I was very happy when I got the plants. I'm happy to see the plants. So I'm constantly reading up, thinking about the door and thinking about the girl. So the feel, like my kids are very sensory. They need to touch. Some of them, when they touch, they do, but but I thought about feeling a bag is a little different.
Yeah.
And like that's about when I first went in there. I was like, oh man, I got a balloon. And I was like, ah, so that I killed a turtle when I was moving. And then I pulled it down and thought it was solved. There's some ethics kind of thing. So it's like it kind of did the same thing. It calmed me. And I know how to use it on my face. And then all the textures, smells. Yeah.
Great. I'm happy to answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions about the work? Oh, goodness, there's just so, there's so much, I mean, I feel like my work is, not, I mean, off the top of my head, there's so many different fields that inform it. So, like, it depends on what angle is curious to you. So, I love Reggio work, if you want to read about Reggio-informed teaching, which talks about, you know, invitations and provocations and child-centered explorations, and that the teacher is the partner and the guide. And I think that even for all levels, like elementary and secondary, to apply Reggio principles. You can also read about like how the evolution of Reggio into PBL work, the project-based learning schools, and all of those, like learning through the projects instead of through subject matters and standards, where they're doing these creative projects and like maybe making a cafe, and through making the cafe they're doing some math and having the design of the menu, and then they're like math of selling it and budgeting, and there's all these, you know, so those two kinds of educational systems. And then, you know, in terms of like the spiritual work, I mean, I can have an endless list of recommendations, and Tara Brach is amazing, and Jack Kornfeld, Pema Chodron has been around. The work on the nervous system and trauma stuff, Gabor Mate, Peter Levine, Stephen.
She does a lot of education theory.
Yes, she's amazing. Laura, yeah, she's amazing. So she kind of combines it, the two. Yeah.
Like young behavior.
Yeah, she's great. Laura, there's another woman in Indiana, I think, Laura, I forget her name. I can send you. And she's doing like trauma-informed training for educators, that you're approaching a classroom with this understanding. Bessel van der Kolk does amazing work on healing. So there's kind of like, right now it's very easy, like endless rabbit holes you can go into to find work on this. And it kind of still separated. There's fewer people, you know, bringing it all together. Nora Orbach, of course.
Yeah,
She's a colleague.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's amazing. And all the play-based educators, Suzanne Axelson, teacher Tom, so those are colleagues. I spoke at a conference with them last year. They do amazing work. It's, even though they're not artists and come from an art ed world, they're play-based educators, and so the playfulness that they work with is, it's in the same spirit. Like I share an affinity with them. But yeah, Nona Orbach is Israeli. She's north of the country. Yeah.
Do you have any references for play resistant children? Because I teach secondary, and it would take lunch just to get them to embrace a play.
That's true.
So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting question. I would.
we've got a society filled with people who are fearful of themselves.
Yeah, and also they want instant gratification, and so to go into these slow art processes, there's definite resistance. Yeah, let me think about that.
My experience, sometimes the first step for student can be allowing them just to observe what's going on and not like forcing them to want to be as a step.
We've also done like interesting play acting where we actually let them embrace that anti-feeling, like give them a role to be like the anti-sayer in the room in this playful way, where then they're like, okay, so you be the anti-police. Whenever somebody's like having too much fun, just be like, too much, stop, and then it like, makes this, I don't know, it just creates that like, oh, it's okay that you can be like that. In fact, I'm going to empower you in that role, and that usually works in this way. And also so that sometimes, so I feel like, so that I don't become the butt of the we choose some outside object where I'll be like, don't you just hate that people are like leaving their dog poo on the street? Just like, it makes me so angry, because it really does make me so angry. And then for the afternoon, instead of being like, Eliza, I don't want to do this, like this, I'm like, let's talk about these nasty people. Who are they? And if you see someone, I want you to be like, don't you dare leave that there. And so then it like, I give them a place to put all that anti-feelings that's not me and not the project. And that usually is grabbed up really fast. Bus drivers, litterers, and people who leave dog poo, those are my I'm anti, so train them on that.
But some of that litter can be
Yes.
salvaged
We do.
and turned into other things.
We do that. We do river cleaning, down by the sea too, and we take it. I don't wear gloves. The parents are like, "What are you doing?" Yeah. Anyways, so thank you. You don't have to give me back the objects. You can keep them.
That was inspiring, and I love being an art teacher, but I've also sort of always felt that I am an art teacher because I didn't know what other name to be doing so many of these types of experiences that you're sharing with the kids. So that was awesome. I just go to you and I was hoping we could get a picture.
Yeah. You can like report to the website.
Exactly.
Can I look at the very last slide?
Oh, I'd be happy to, except my hand is dirty because there's that dirt on it. It's hard to
Yeah, we are.
We've got the screen right here. It's
Oh.
not the prettiest.
Oh.
We can just have to I love this color. No, no, wait. Anyway, picture you're happy with it.
So glad that we connected.
Yeah, it's good. I took a picture of this, but every slide because I couldn't read and listen at the same time, and it was such a rich presentation. It's a lot. I wonder if I'm going to post my presentation on the first.
I don't have anything today, Thursday and Friday. I didn't work so stuff, so but with the Caucus on Saturday.
Okay, one is I took those because I think I'll be a bit late and I just at the very beginning. I got here either once. Okay. Excuse me. The woman behind me came in much later than me, and I shared the photos with her. So, okay, just wanted to make sure. So, and I teach at a tiny Jewish school. Oh, really? And so I feel like what you're doing, you're the art teacher that I believe. Because I don't want to teach art, I want to teach art for a living. So everybody I have a lot of teachers working for me also. I'm like, do it. More of us. Do you do any more? Yes. Ooh, I mean, play with some big ones in parks and stuff. I had art. I saw the workshops by Lazarus or that you can make an art room with the students. I can show you one. I realize I'm recording this.
So that's